Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this second webinar for the Snowmelt Control 654. We did do one earlier, and it was just before the 654 was released. So we decided to do a second one in case any questions or concerns had come up since the product release that you wanted to address. So before we get going, I just want to point out that you can mute yourself. So there is a button up here called Mute Me. So if you know that you're going to be in a noisy environment, that might be a good thing to do so we don't all hear it. Now, I don't know how many of you at this point have seen the Snowmelt training webinars that used to be on a private YouTube channel just for you reps and have since been moved to our public tekmar video YouTube channel. So just before we get going, I'll show you where that is. So here's our website, and we can click on the support tab on the tekmar website. And then if we click on training, you'll see we do have some of our webinars up on this training page. Now, we don't have the Snowmelt videos up here as of yet, but these are all links to our YouTube channel. So if I click on one of those links, I can see there is a little link to tekmar video. Now, I could also have accessed this page just by going to the youtube.com website and then doing a search for tekmar video. And you can see here we have the entire Snowmelt training webinar series, and you can see all 8 of those segments here. Now, we did get some requests to increase the quality of these videos, and what we've done is we did do just that, and you can see here for best quality change settings to 720p HD. So that's accessed by clicking on this little gear and then choosing the highest level quality that you can. Okay? Now, just like the first webinar that we did, the Q&A webinar, we asked you if you had any questions to email them in or call them in if you were speaking to someone from customer service. We haven't gotten any of your email or call-in questions. Does anyone have any that they'd like to start off the Q&A with?
Elizabeth, this is Rob Byers with HSY Van.
Hi there, Rob.
I guess one I had was the webinars, I think, covered a lot. I started writing a lot of them down, but as I went through it, it answered them.
Yep, that's great.
In doing mixing, is there a way to do mixing with boiler protection outside of, I mean, can you do it with, because I know you need to have an outdoor sensor hooked to a unit.
Right, and that's a really good question. That is covered in one of our applications. I'll pass this question over to Jay, and I'll try and find the application where we do show this.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. So to answer your question there, Rob, the 654 is able to operate a mixing device, but if you want to do boiler return protection, the outdoor sensor wiring terminal, basically it does double duty. It does your outdoor sensor and your boiler return protection. We didn't have enough wiring terminals to do both at the same time. So we made it an either or. So if you have a tekmar 654 that's wired together with a tekmarnet system controller, so think of a tekmar house control, or it could be one of our outdoor reset modules, which would be like the 420, 421, 422, or 423. Then the 654 in that case can do the boiler return protection and does have a boiler return sensor connection to it. So on this illustration that's on the screen here, you'll notice that we have a boiler return sensor located on the return pipe back to the boiler, and that is wired back to the 654. And the boiler in this case is operated by the house control that we're showing off to the left here. And that's actually going to be operating the boiler in this case. So think of the 654 as operating a snow melting zone similar to like a thermostat zone on the house control in this case. So it's not a complete replacement for the snow melting control 667 or the 664 for mixing, if that's what your question is. Does that answer your question there, Rob?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that was basically the question, is being able to use it as a standalone control to perform some mixing without adding another device. I mean, if I had something else that has an outdoor sensor hooked to it, what if I'm thinking of maybe if they're doing a car wash, I know they show the multi-zone car wash application, but there's really no protection on that one. If I did something like that and I used, like for the inside, I'm thinking of a drive-through car wash, and sometimes they have another bay next to it, that we're doing effectively a radiant heating inside the building. The thermostat could use the tie an outdoor sensor to it. I don't really have any other control from the standpoint of a boiler control. I'm just thinking if I did the mixing for the outdoor approach areas with the 654, and then the inside is just a thermostat. It has an input that I could say it's an outdoor sensor. I'm controlling that, but if that's a non-condensing boiler and I'm just turning on these pumps, I could effectively get some pretty cold water. You can use that freeze protection aquastat. But I was wondering if I could effectively do that type of an application with boiler protection.
Right. So the 654, even if you link it up with a thermostat to get the outdoor air temperature, it will not do the boiler return protection in that case. So that is mentioned in our instruction manual, and if you could bring that up, Elizabeth, it's trying to remember what, it's towards the back of the document under the mixing section. So if you go to the index page, you go to mixing, it's on page 23. Oh, no, it's under the sequence of operation. Yeah, keep going. All right. So in this section here, it talks about how the second paragraph under the mixing operation talks about that boiler protection is only available when the snow melting control is connected to a Team 4 system control. And we define that as being either a house control, so that's like a 400, 401, 402, 403, or if it's a universal reset module, which is a 420, 421, 422, or 423. Okay.
Okay, no, that answers it. That's good.
And I guess another part to add to that is that the 667 and 664 will continue to be in the tekmar product line. And if you have standalone mixing applications, we would continue to recommend those products. So the 654 is, if you think of it as a snow melting zone, similar to like a thermostat zone, and you can do multiple snow melting zones, that's probably one of the strongest applications that the 654 supports. And of course, you can also connect it up to boilers, whether it's a modulating boiler or an on-off boiler as well. And we also support an electric boiler or electric cable operation as well. So we'll talk about that perhaps in upcoming slides, or that is also discussed in the video. Is there any other questions that anyone would like to ask? Okay, so we have a question here from Owen, and it says, is the 665 going away? So to answer your question, the 665 will continue to be in the tekmar product line, and the 654 is not necessarily a direct replacement for it. But there is obviously a bit of a price difference between the 665 and the 654 as well. So, so that should answer your question there, Owen. Is there any other questions?
Yes, I had a few.
Jay, it's Tom Kane. Can you hear me?
Oh, Tom, go for it.
Okay, Tom, go ahead.
Just a quick question. I mean, if this is a standalone project on the snow melt and using a modulating condensing gas boiler, this really is the control to default to. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. For a modulating condensing boiler, the 654 has the logic built into it to modulate the boiler. And we actually have an application drawing that Elizabeth is going to find here. Okay, one more back, yeah. All right. So, Tom, we have an application here. So the 654 is actually, it has a boiler supply sensor in this case. And the 654 can then use that boiler supply sensor to regulate the modulating boiler's firing output. So as the snow melting system warms up and reaches its set point temperature, then we can actually tell the modulating boiler to back off and operate at a lower firing rate to match the heat loss of the slab. And this can eliminate unnecessary cycling of the boiler going on and off.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There was another question. Sorry, I didn't.
From Todd.
Okay.
Hey, guys. I got a few here. One's a little more advanced. If you were using the 654 with a 423 and you want to take advantage of the 3 buses that are on there, can you use the 444 mix and expansion modules that have the different outputs, or even the 441 mixing output module for your mixing valves, instead of getting the 0 to 10 out of the 654? So you'd be using the 423 to control your different mix devices. So can your 444s, the 441s, can they be your mixing valves instead of, you know, like the injection pump and that kind of thing?
Right, okay.
Thoughts on that, on the 423, because it's part of the different buses, right?
Right. I'm just going to summarize your question, Todd. So the question is can you use the mixing operation from either a house control, say a 402 or 403, or the mixing operation on a 422 or 423? And the answer is yes, you can. So the 654, when it calls for snow melting operation, it calls for heat just like a thermostat would. And so, for example, you could have a system where you have either a 3-way valve or a 4-way valve or a variable speed injection pump operated by your TekmarNet controller. So it would be either the house control or the 422 or 423. And that device would actually operate the mixing operation. And the 654 just calls for heat on that water temperature.
So in essence, if you had a 654, say you want to do 3 mixed snow melt zones, you could utilize the 423 and basically instead of, if you didn't have a 0 to 10 pump, or if maybe the mixing valve, you didn't have a 0 to 10 mixing valve, you could use the 444 mix expansion module or the 441 for the motor and tie that into the TN4 network for the specific bus. Is that correct?
Correct. So to just summarize that question, you can use the mixing expansion modules that tekmar offers, so the 440, the 441, or the 444, and those can actually operate the mixing, and the 654 just operates as a zone off of that water temperature. So you could actually have multiple 664s on one water temperature with one mixing device, or you could have up to 3 mixing devices and 3 snow melting zones. And it would also be able to support any combination thereof as well. So you could have a mix 1 water temperature with 2 snow melting zones with 664s, and then you could have a mix 2 water temperature with just a single 654 on it. So you could do any combination that you want to do that in that way.
And we do show this in application 5, where we are connecting from the 422 and we're operating the actuating motor from there.
Perfect. Can the schedule master on a TN4 thermostat, say a 552, can the 654 be a member of that schedule?
Right. I'm just going to summarize the question. So the 654 does support programmable schedules, and it can be a member of a schedule provided by a different thermostat, and the 654 can also be a master of a schedule, so it can provide a programmable schedule to the rest of the devices on the TekmarNet system. So to answer your question, yes, you can program a schedule. And just for, many of you might wonder, well, why would you want to have a programmable schedule? The schedule would probably be most appropriate for instances like a car wash, where it might be a business that only requires snow melting or ice melting at certain times of the day. We would not necessarily promote a programmable schedule for a residential application. Not to say that you couldn't do it, but I don't see why you would preferably want to operate your snow melting system on a programmable schedule.
If it's on a programmable schedule, I guess there's no such, it's not going to do like what the thermostats do, where it'll be melted for you by the time you come into the occupied time. Like say event 1 on that slide is 6 a.m. Would it be actually ready and melted by 6 a.m., or would it just come on at 6 a.m. and then you'd have to allow a time period to melt the snow?
Right. That's a very good question. When you're using a programmable schedule, when it enters event 1 at, say, in this case, 6 a.m., then the snow melting system starts. So there is no optimum start for snow melting. It just, as soon as 6 a.m. in this particular example rolls by, then the snow melting system turns on. And if you have an automatic snow ice detector type sensor, so if you have an 090, an 094, or the new snow sensor 095, then in those cases, even when it enters in the occupied schedule at say 6 a.m., then the sensor also requires to be wet in addition, in order to have the snow melting turn on.
Can you use the 654 into a 406 and any of the different buses, like mixed boiler or tank? Is there any opportunities there? I know with the 406 is sort of dedicated for that, but we have gotten calls where guys want to do snow melting from the geo. I know we don't really recommend it, but what are your thoughts there, or anything, opportunities there?
Right, good question. So the House Control 406 can operate heat pumps, and the 654, again, when it's connected to a TekmarNet system, it appears just like a thermostat does on the system. So when it calls for heat, it can call for heat either on the tank bus, the mix bus, or on the boiler bus of a House Control 406. And in certain areas, for example, we do know that in certain regions, such as in Colorado, there's a couple of counties where you're only able to do snow melting with geothermal heating. So it's certainly a possibility, and you can certainly use a heat pump to operate your snow melting system.
So if you put it on say a tank bus, and the snow melting isn't going to keep up, or the geothermal's not keeping up, will it engage the boiler, the backup boiler, maybe either atmospheric or condensing or whatever?
It would activate the backup boiler after that time delay, yes.
Oh, great. Okay. And then with all the house controls, then there's no more priority or anything like that when you're using snow melt, because before you'd have to tie into the set point demand, but now being a thermostat, it's not going to have priority over the space heating, or space heating having priority over snow melting?
Right, good question. So the question is there priority of the snow melting system over the heating system, or vice versa? So to answer that question is that it depends on which bus the 654 is wired to, but if it's wired to the boiler bus, then it respects domestic hot water priority, for example. So when you're heating your hot water tank, the house control or the universal reset controller has the option to disable the snow melting, just like a thermostat would be disabled on the boiler bus. So, good questions. We have another question here from Owen. It says, I have been asked about the 653. While we do not have it, can we get a brief preview to answer those questions as we are asked about it? So yes, the 653 is a snow melting product, and you've probably seen it on our price sheets. So just to answer the question on that, the 653 is an electric snow melting control, and we will be, the plan is basically to package that together with an electrical contactor and possibly some other electrical accessories as well, so that you guys would have a complete electrical snow melting package to offer to customers. Maybe there might be a hydronic snow melting expert that maybe they have a large hydronic snow melting area, and then maybe there's just a small little area that they want to do with snow melting. May not be easy to pipe it in mechanically for a hydronic snow melt. That same contractor could offer the electrical option, for example. So the 653 resembles the 654. It does not have the TekmarNet communication on it, and it's a little bit simplified as well. It does not have idling on it, for example. So it's a simplified version of the 654. So hopefully that answers your question there, Owen.
Yes, sir.
We have a question from Tom Kane. It says, will these slides be available to us for training customers in the field. So to answer your question there, Tom, the slides are available on the YouTube website. And if you actually want the PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to refer that over to Elizabeth.
Yes, there is a plan to add the presentations only to the portal. So that should be up sometime this week. And since we're talking about the portal, I'll show you now that you can see the first Q&A event has been posted to the portal, and we will be posting the second Q&A event, today's event, this week as well, along with the slides themselves, so you can use these for customers.
Hey guys, I think the slides are already up because I've already downloaded all 8 segments.
Oh, perfect then.
You're okay.
Oh, I have to log in again. Oh, I see. Snow melting. Yeah, they're just broken up here. So we have some under feature, some under equipment operation, controls and applications. So yeah, they're all there. They're just broken up into different categories. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. So Tom, obviously you can download those right now. So you're all set to show those slides to your customers. Any other questions at this time?
Yeah, I have one here on the 095.
Okay.
Does it actually come with any wire, or is it just the socket itself? Because it looks like it shows like 5 wires, but does it actually come with a wire, or is it?
Right. So let's just quickly review the 095. So it's called the Snow Sensor 095. You'll notice that it does not mention the word ice in it. The Snow Sensor 095 is installed on a pole or on a conduit, and basically it allows you to do automatic snowfall detection. Because the sensor is not on the slab, it cannot sense the actual conditions of the slab, and it cannot really detect ice per se either. So it's a great product for retrofit applications where the 090 has not been installed, or I guess I should say the sensor socket has not been installed in the concrete. So the 095 mounts onto a conduit, and the conduit can be either attached to the roof, so on the fascia board of the roof line of a building. You can even, they can even drill a hole through the roof and use like a rubber boot to kind of seal the connection and have the sensor protruding from the roof as shown in this illustration here. Or you can have a conduit off to the side of your snow melting area, and you would just want to keep it, the sensor, elevated higher than any kind of snow drifts, or if somebody were to like mechanically shovel or plow the snow, that you're not knocking that pole over. So it can be either PVC or rigid metal conduit, 1/2 inch. And if you go to the next slide there, so the 095 does not come with any wire. The contractor can provide the wire, 18 gauge, up to 500 feet from the control to the 095. And it requires 4 conductors. There's a yellow, blue, red, and black. So does that answer your question there, Todd?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's good. I wasn't sure if it actually was supplied with a wire or not, so that's no problem.
So we've actually fielded a number of questions recently on the 095 regarding compatibility with the older snow melting products. So the snow sensor 095 is only compatible with the snow melting control 654. The older products, so the 664, 665, and 667, do not have the software logic to operate the 095 and are therefore not compatible. So we're going to open up the floor here for further questions.
Hey, Jay, do you hear me?
I can hear you.
I've got a few questions on the water temperature that the control's going to attempt to send out to a slab based on the slab temperature. And I want to use an example of 10 individual zones with one 090 and a series of 073s throughout the balance of the 9 654s. I want to use the 0 to 10 volt signal so I have accurate water temperature control and 10 different mixing pumps on this example. I'd like you to kind of go over how the control will start with one zone and then go into the conditional priorities, allowing maybe 3 or 4 zones to be operating, and if so, at different water temperatures during that time. Or I'm just curious how the tracking process goes, and I think that might be good to just kind of review if we have time.
Right, okay, good question. So the 654, one of the neat features of it is that it supports zoning for snow melting. So in this particular example, we have 4 snow melting zones. So that means we would have 4 of the 654 snow melting controllers. And we can actually assign a zone number to each controller. Now, zone 1 has the priority. And typically you would install a snow ice sensor 090. You could also install a snow sensor 095 in zone 1. So maybe that's your driveway, for example. When that zone 1 detects snow, then, actually I guess I should say, the other zones as well, they can have their own individual 090s, or they can just have a slab sensor 072, like in your example there. If they do not have the 090s and they only have a slab sensor, then the 654s have this option called zone tracking, which means that zone 1 is your lead. So zone 1 is going to have an 090 installed in the driveway in this example. And zone 2 is a 654, and it has what we call zone tracking on. So that snow melting control is now looking at zone 1, and when zone 1 detects snow, zone 1 starts melting. And zone 2 can also start melting at the same time. Or if you have priority selected, we offer 3 different options of priority. We can actually wait for zone 1 to finish melting before zone 2 turns on. And that's called priority equals full, or full priority. Or we can also offer conditional priority, which means that zone 1 runs, and once zone 1 reaches its melting temperature, we can then turn on zone 2. And zone 2 is then melts, and it repeats the same amount of running time as zone 1. So if zone 1 runs for, say, 3 hours, then zone 2 is also going to run for 3 hours, and then it will shut off.
During that time in the conditional priority slag that was just up. My understanding that once zone 1 gets up to temperature, we're not going to turn it off and on like the 665 has done. We could send a 50-degree water per se out to that zone to maintain the 38-degree setting until the sensor's dry, or does it actually pulse like the 665?
Okay, good question. So the question is does the zone pulse on and off while it's melting for zone 1 once it's up to temperature? So to answer that question is that it does turn the zone on and off just like a 665 would once it reaches that, what we call the slab target. So we're warming the slab up to reach the slab target, and once it's equal to the slab target, then we don't want to overheat the slab, so we start to cycle that zone on and off to maintain that temperature, and the zone continues to melt. So in this particular example, you'll notice that it doesn't say on or off, it says off or melt. So even though the relay might be off and we're not putting any more heat into the zone is still melting because the concrete is warm, and we're going to continue cycling the relay on and off as required to melt snow on that zone. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. The only other thing I might have is again the water temperature. Is that just a fixed 120 degrees, or how does that work? I heard you mention something that we will send a reset water temperature out to that zone, and I'm just kind of trying to picture that one.
Right. The 654 will automatically call for heat on the TekmarNet bus, just like a thermostat would, and it will automatically determine what the water temperature will be. So we have another question from Tom. It says, are there individual terminal strips for multiple O90s, or do you wire multiple sensors in parallel? So I guess what I should mention is that each 654 can only have a single O90 installed. So what we're doing is through the TekmarNet communication, we're able to connect multiple 654 controllers together to do the zoning. Now, we do have a feature called the tandem snow ice detection, which is new, and so we'll just quickly review that. Okay, so in this particular feature, we call it tandem snow ice detection. So it's the same snow melting zone, but we're going to install two O90s into it. And this does two things. Number one is it gives us a wider area that we're detecting snow or ice over. And the other thing that we're doing in this case is that each O90 provides 100% backup for each other. So in order to do the tandem snow ice detection, you need to have two O90s and two 654s. And we're going to link the two controllers together using TekmarNet. One of the controls is actually going to be declared as our snow zone master, and the other one is declared as the snow zone member. And the master controller, it's going to actually operate the snow melting equipment. So whether you're operating a boiler or a mixing valve, or you're running an electrical snow melting system, that control is operating the heating system. The snow zone member controller is strictly reading the snow ice sensor 090's conditions on the slab. Once it's measured that information, it communicates it over the TekmarNet wires to the snow zone master controller. And the master basically averages the slab temperature and sends the combined sensor reading. So say one sensor is wet, the other one is dry. The master then says, okay, I have one sensor that's wet and the other one's dry. I'm going to say that the zone is wet and I'm going to run the snow melting system. So this is a new feature, and we believe that there will be a number of people interested in this, especially for long driveways, for example, where conditions may be different at different points on the driveway, as well as when a snow melting area is first installed, there may be small trees planted, and those small trees grow into big trees that affect the snow melting or the snowfall pattern. So having two 090's installed in a slab gives you that extra detection for snow and provides better reliability. Okay, so are there any other questions? We got about 20 minutes left here.
Well, Jay, we have gotten quite a few questions about what can be seen and adjusted from the Gateway 483. So maybe you want to go over that.
Okay, so we do have a slide on that. So each 654 will appear on the gateway similar to, as like a thermostat. So you're going to see the current temperature reading of the slab, and you'll actually be able to click under the zone name, so you might call it Snow Melt Driveway, and you'll be able to individually, for each zone, adjust the melting, the idling, and the storm temperature set points. You can also, the 654 controllers support the away scene. So for example, if you go and click under the Scenes tab on the gateway, if you click away, then the 654 has the option to not operate the snow melt system while you're on vacation, for example. In addition to that, if you click under System Details on the gateway, it will show you the operating status of the snow melting control. So it'll tell you whether the system is off or melting, or it could also be in idle or storm operation. Tells you what your slab target, your slab temperature, and whether the sensor is dry or wet. And if it's operating a boiler or a mixing valve or injection pump, it'll also tell you what your supply temperature is and whether the pumps are running as well. And each of these parameters that you can view on the System Details page can also be graphed on the graphing page. Now, the Gateway software has not been released yet that supports the 654, but we're anticipating that to be available in the next couple of weeks.
Any other questions with regards to the Gateway? No?
What about the 482? Is there, what do they see, or what can some of the different home automation people see? Or?
Right, that's a good question. So the Gateway 482, we are going to be releasing an updated version of the 482 software that will support the ability to turn on or off the snow melting system by the home automation system. Now, before that is fully available, tekmar needs to release the software on the 482. In addition to that, the home automation company, they have to adjust their driver to support those commands, and so we'll be working together with them this summer to incorporate that support as well. So it's kind of like both things have to be available, like the 482 has to have the update and the home automation system has to support it in their driver in order for it to be available to the end customer. So that could take maybe a couple of months here, and we'll keep you guys informed as to what's going on with that.
Any other questions with regards to the gateways?
Yeah, I have one, Elizabeth.
Okay.
And help us understand the economy mode. But if we're in that mode where it's going to ask us if we want to melt the snow, will that be available on the gateway?
Right. Okay. So to answer your question, we actually call it Econo Melt, and the option is not selectable on the gateway. You can only select it on the control. So the idea of the Econo Melt feature is you have a snow ice detector 090 installed in your slab, but you may want to either mechanically remove the snow or shovel it, and then you can actually press the melt button on the 654, and the snow melt system will just run until the sensor is dry. So we do know, for example, some people, when they build a home, they want to have a fully automated snow melting system. That home is then sold, and then the new owners may have different expectations as to what they want to operate their system. So this allows them to have the greatest amount of flexibility. So we have a question here. When do you see the next generation of a gateway or other form of internet connectivity coming? Anything like a cloud? So I'm actually going to say that is in a different conversation from now, but we are in fact investigating other gateway type of technologies. So, but we will, like I said, we'll kind of defer that to another conversation. Any other questions on snow melting?
Well, we had an interesting question come in. How many zones can I have on the 654?
Right. Okay, so 654, when you connect it up to tekmarnet, we can have a maximum of 12 zones. And when you have your 12 zones, you can select to have priority. And if you have priority on, like the full priority, then each zone has to run and fully melt before the next zone turns on. Or if you select the conditional priority, the higher priority zone has to reach its melting temperature before the lower priority zone can turn on. So the priority is with zone 1 is the highest priority, and zone 12 has the lowest priority.
So there's a question I was asked last week, which is, can I have 2 separate snowmelt systems, 12 zones in each system, and connect one system on a mix 1 bus? and then have another set of 12 on a mix 2 bus?
Right. All right. Thank you for the question. With the zones are for the entire system. So whether the zone is on mix 1 or mix 2, we're limited to 12 for the entire heating system. Okay.
Another question I had was, if you do want to use the 0 to 10 mixing output on a 654, and you're connecting it to a 423, where do you connect that device? Is it going to the boiler bus, or are you going to use the set point demand?
Right. Okay. Good question. So the 654, if you're using it in conjunction with any other TekmarNet's products, you're going to want to wire it using the TekmarNet bus, and it's going to call for heat over the TekmarNet system. And the 654 will automatically determine what water temperature to call for. And of course, the 423 still has its boiler max or mix maximum that limits the operating water temperature.
Any questions with regards to that? No?
We're going to talk quickly about the snow melting control when you use it in conjunction with a user switch. So the user switch 480 and 481, you can program each of the 3 buttons. And the snow melting control 654 has been designed to be operable together with the user switches. So we have a feature called the melt group, and we have another group called the storm group, and those can be tied to one of the user switch buttons. So in this particular illustration, we actually have 2 654s, and they're part of storm group number 1. And when I press the storm button, then both of the snow melting controls go and operate in their storm mode, which we actually haven't talked about yet today. But likewise, if you press, do we have one that has the melt groups on it? Oh, okay. So if you have a melt group as well, you can actually press a button on the user switch and actually start melting. You can either have it melt 1 snow melting control or any number of snow melting controls all at the same time. Again, we have the melt group can be assigned a number of 1 through 12, and so you can actually you can start a single 654 by pressing the melt button on the user switch, or you can actually have up to a maximum of 12 zones all start together when you press the button on the user switch there. So we are kind of, in the brochure, we promote configuring the user switch to have a storm button, a melt button, and a away button. Now let's just quickly talk about the storm feature. Elizabeth, we have a slide on the storm. Okay, so when we talk about storm, the storm feature is the old controls call it temporary idle. So when you enter in the storm operation, We're going to idle the slab for a number of hours, and if snow is detected, then we jump up to the melting temperature. If snow is not detected, then we go from the storm temperature and we just turn the system off. The purpose of the storm feature is a lower cost form of idling, primarily for residential users, but it could also be used in a commercial setting as well. And of course, the purpose of the storm or idling is that you're preheating the slab so that it's not all the way, like it's not warm enough to actually melt the snow, but we're warming up the slab so that should it snow, we can quickly reach the melting temperature. Any questions on the storm operation or any feature?
Jay, I have one, Jay.
Okay.
I was talking to somebody about that the other day, and they made the comment that it takes a lot more energy to remove the snow off of a zone 4 than it does to run zone 1. And I know we have the add note type of feature, but I just didn't know if yourself or anybody listening has an opinion on the amount of BTU it may take to remove if it's activated at the initial storm or if it takes more to remove later.
Right. Okay. Well, when you're operating a snow melting system, there's energy required to actually warm the slab from whatever the cold start temperature is. Let's just say 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're warming that up and we're reaching, say, the melting temperature at 32. So there's that amount of energy to heat up the slab. Now, once we actually reach 32, the load on the slab actually increases because as we start to melt the water, changing the water from snow to water doesn't require a lot of energy per se, but then the water starts to evaporate. And to evaporate water, there's a huge amount of energy that has to go into it. So of course, most snowmelt systems, you want to encourage people to have drains, et cetera, to drain the water off. But there is always some water that is evaporated, and that significantly increases the load on the slab. So trying to go back to what we were talking about, the storm feature, to raise the concrete up from 20 degrees up to 32, that amount of energy may be smaller than actually the amount of energy to melt and dry off the concrete slab. Just because evaporating the water requires hundreds of times more energy than just increasing the temperature of the water.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're approaching our 1 hour end to this question and answer period. Is there any last minute questions that anyone has?
You got one? Me?
Go ahead there.
This is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
How are you doing?
Good.
Okay. So my question, I've got a job right now, or an application with 8 snow melt zones, and I'm figuring 6x4s, and I wanted to do a TN4 network to a 284 boiler staging control.
Right, okay.
So my demand will be communicated via the communication, the TN4 communication back to the control. What am I going to be able to see with doing that if I pull up the 284, or if it's hooked to a home automation system, let's say.
Right. If you have it connected to a home automation system, when we release the newer version of the 482 software, and when the home automation company implements the new software driver, then they will be able to, through the home automation system, turn each individual zone on or off.
But
they're not going to be able to see any of the information from the boiler controller, and they won't be able to see any of the operational temperatures from the snow melting control. On the flip side, though, if they had the same system connected to a Gateway 483, they would be able to see all the boiler operating parameters, okay, like boiler temperatures, the boiler firing rate, and they would be able to see each of the snow melting zones and be able to or adjust the melting, the idle, and the storm temperatures via the Gateway 483.
If I was using a Gateway 483, I could just use a 275 and get the same result, right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
I have another question here. Does the user switch allow for automatic operation while you are away from the house, or is it simply a manual start-stop?
Right. Okay. So the user switch can be, well, you actually have 3 buttons on the user switch. So to answer your question is that it can be used as a manual start-stop, and you can also use it to put the system into a way so it prevents it from automatically starting while you're on vacation.
But you cannot access that while you are away from the house, unless you had a third-party piece of equipment.
Right. The user switches do allow you to connect it to like a phone dialer type of piece of equipment and just use like a relay to start or stop the system. So it does support the away operation in that case, but it does not allow you to start or stop it via like a phone switch or a phone dialer. If you need more information on that, though, we can discuss that offline. But basically, any of the features of the user switch, such as scenes or what we call the set point enables, are compatible with the SnowMelt Control 654.
Okay, any last-minute questions, or are we ready to wrap up? It is just after 11 o'clock. All right, I'm not hearing anything. So thank you guys so much for joining us for this second Q&A event. I think it was really productive. The quality of the questions was amazing. So thank you guys very much. Do you want to add something, Jay?
I just want to thank everybody for attending. And if you have not viewed the YouTube videos on our website, I would highly encourage you guys to watch those. Most of them are 15-minute segments, and view them online there, and it has plenty of good information.
And as I said before, this recording will be on the portal by the end of this week. Okay, thanks everyone so much. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.